So again, let's start with a short meditation. This morning's two topics we're going to discuss are the shamatha and vipassana practices. So I thought we could do a little bit of both in this meditation. So we'll start with a bit of shamatha and then we'll do a little bit of vipassana in this meditation. We begin by preparing the body, setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. And relaxing more deeply with each out-breath. And with each out-breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen. And setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. Letting go of any hopes or fears, worries or concerns about the past or the future. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Focusing on the sensations of the breath throughout the body. Maintaining that ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. Now, do you have a sense that there is a me here who is meditating? A me who is trying to focus on the breath. A me that doesn't seem to depend upon anything else to exist. Do you have this experience? Can the me who is meditating be found anywhere? Can the meditator be found anywhere within the body? So search thoroughly every part of the body and look for the me who is meditating. Is the me who is meditating somewhere to be found inside the head? Somewhere behind the eyes? the brain the me who is meditating? Or is the brain simply something which I possess? Something which me, the meditator, is using? Is the whole body itself the me who is meditating? Or is the whole body itself simply something which I possess? Something which me, the meditator, is trying to relax? Is me, the meditator, anywhere to be found within the mind? So again, search thoroughly every part of the mind and look for the me who is meditating. Are any of the thoughts, emotions or concepts in the mind, are any of these the me who is meditating? Or are thoughts, emotions and concepts simply things which I possess, things which me, the meditator, has? Is the mind itself the me who is meditating? or is the mind itself simply something which I possess, something which me, the meditator, is using to focus on the breath? Is the combination of the body and the mind, is that the me who is meditating? Or is the combination of the body and the mind simply two things which I possess? Two things which me, the meditator, is trying to relax and train. Yet, other than the body and the mind, what else is there here? If there's nothing more than the body and the mind here, then where is the me who possesses this body and mind and is trying to train this body and mind? Where is the me who is meditating? Now, even if you didn't find the me who is meditating, isn't there someone who's experiencing all of this? So there is a me who is meditating. But just because we don't seem to be able to find it, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It simply means it's empty of findable, independent existence. There is no independent me who is meditating. But that doesn't mean there's no meditator at all. The me who is meditating here is a me that is simply labelled on the basis of the body that is sitting here and the mind that is focusing on the breath. The merely labelled me is sitting here meditating. And then release all appearances and simply allow the mind to come to rest. Resting in awareness itself. Not doing anything at all. Simply being present, being aware. Again, let's start with a short review. So we've been looking at the lamb rim structure. So of course first on Thursday we began by looking at a general structure, the structure of the Four Noble Truths. That the Four Noble Truths is the foundation of all Buddhist traditions. And we saw there that we are stuck in this unsatisfactory state called dukkha. Why are we stuck in this state? Because of our mental afflictions. Particularly underlying those is our fundamental ignorance, misunderstanding nature of reality. And that we can liberate ourselves from this unsatisfactory state by coming to realize the nature of reality and thereby overcoming all mental afflictions and suffering. And so this is the Four Noble Truths. And this is the foundation of all Buddhist traditions. And then we had a look at how that is the basis of all the different Buddhist traditions. We first saw that within what's called the Theravada traditions of Buddhism, they are based on the Four Noble Truths. So the goal of the spiritual practice in the Theravada traditions is the goal of nirvana, the goal of personal liberation from suffering. And then we saw how the Mahayana traditions, which of course Tibetan Buddhism is part of, build on top of that and have their goal as not only personal liberation from suffering, but the goal of complete enlightenment so that we can also help to liberate everyone else from suffering. And there we saw that the aspiration we need to develop is the aspiration of bodhicitta, this aspiration for enlightenment, for the welfare of others. And to achieve the goal of enlightenment, we need to come to realize emptiness. Realize that everything's empty of independent existence. And then lastly, we saw that the Vajrayana level of practice, or Tantra sometimes called, which within Buddhism only really exists in a fully developed form still in Tibetan Buddhism, how this builds on top of the Mahayana by gaining access to the very most subtle level of our mind, sometimes called clear light mind, primordial mind, given many different names, and that through that we can accelerate the spiritual path to enlightenment. So we saw the general framework of the Theravada, Four Noble Truths, on top of that the Mahayana level of practice, and then on top of that the Vajrayana level of practice. And then yesterday we went through the Lam Rim structure. This is the structure of practice that was developed and is the basis of now the Geluk school of Tibetan Buddhism. And we saw within the Lam Rim structure, and the Lam Rim covers all three levels, the Four Noble Truths level, the Mahayana level, the Vajrayana level, how we are to follow those levels of practice in a very structured, systematic, methodical way. And we saw in the Lam Rim that the very first topic there was relying on a teacher. That if we really want to be most effective in the spiritual path, very helpful to have a qualified teacher, because they can tailor the spiritual path according to our specific needs. They can guide us closely. They can correct any mistakes we engage in and help us to overcome obstacles. So a lot of benefit with having a qualified teacher. And then on that basis, the next topic we saw in the Lam Rim was the precious human life. To reflect on our precious human life. The fact that we're not just human, but we have a human life full of opportunities. The idea, of course, for this reflection is that we don't then waste our life and regret having wasted our life. So by reflecting on this, we'll see what a precious opportunity we have, and we'll want to take advantage of this opportunity and make our life meaningful. And then in the Lam Rim, we looked at three levels in which we can make our life meaningful. The first level, the initial level, is to strive for a good future. And to help us to develop the aspiration to strive for a good future, we saw one reflection there, very important, the reflection on death. Because if we don't reflect on death, then even though we may appreciate we've got a precious opportunity, we often live in this illusion that, I'm going to live a long time, I can do that meaningful stuff later, I'm busy now. And we keep putting it off and we never begin. So by reflecting on death, we can really appreciate that this precious opportunity is not going to last forever, so let's take advantage of it now while we've still got it. And then, in order to strive for a good future, we looked at that topic of karma. The idea that actually there's a law of cause and effect operating in terms of our actions and our experiences. And that if we engage in harmful behavior, we'll end up with suffering. Virtuous behavior, happiness. And so by doing this reflection, then we can appreciate how we can achieve a good future is to avoid harmful behavior. And so then we can adopt an ethical lifestyle. And so if we adopt an ethical lifestyle, that will go a long way to ensuring a good future, not just in this life, but in future lives. So that's the minimum, or the first level in which we can make our life meaningful, simply by adopting an ethical lifestyle. But then we can understand, even if we adopt an ethical lifestyle and we have a relatively good existence, we still are stuck in this state of dukkha. There's still this potential for some suffering to arise in our life. So then we can go to the next level of making our life meaningful. And that is to not just strive for a good future, but strive to break free of this cycle altogether. To strive for the goal of liberation from all suffering and its causes. So that's the goal of nirvana. So someone of middling capacity at the next level has their goal nirvana. Of course, first we need to develop the aspiration for this. So we saw in the Lam Rim, we can reflect on the first two noble truths. The truth of dukkha, the truth of causes of dukkha. To understand the situation we're in, to understand that we're stuck in this situation due to our mental afflictions. and to understand that actually mental afflictions are something we can eliminate from our mind, and thereby we will develop the aspiration to break free. This aspiration often translated as renunciation. Once we've developed this aspiration for liberation, for nirvana, then of course we need some practices to strive for the goal of nirvana. And there we saw in the Lam Rim the practices were the 3 higher trainings. Again, as before, adopting an ethical lifestyle as a basis. On that basis, engaging in concentration practice to develop a calm, clear and focused mind. And then on that basis to enter into the wisdom practice, the Vipassana practice, to come to realize the nature of reality so that we can overcome the fundamental ignorance which is causing the mental afflictions which are leading to suffering. And so here, the fundamental ignorance that we are to overcome is this grasping onto self, grasping onto the belief that there is an autonomous me here somewhere. And so thereby, in the 3 high trainings, this is the Vipassana practice, realizing no self. And if we can realize there's no self, we can overcome mental afflictions and suffering and achieve the goal of nirvana, personal liberation. So that's at the next level of how to make the human life meaningful. But then we can even build on that and expand our motivation even further, because we can understand that we're not the only ones stuck in this situation. Everyone else is also stuck in the same situation. So we can expand our motivation, not only wishing to liberate ourselves from suffering, but wishing to help liberate everyone else from suffering. And thereby, someone at the great capacity, at the next level, has their goal, not just nirvana, personal liberation, but the goal of complete enlightenment. Because in that state of complete enlightenment, we can be most effective in helping liberate others. So then the goal at this is enlightenment. So of course we need to first develop the aspiration for enlightenment, which is called bodhicitta. And we saw in the Lam Rim 2 techniques there, the 7 cause and effect, and the equalizing and exchanging self with others. These 2 techniques, reflecting on these, can help us to develop this aspiration of bodhicitta. Once we've developed bodhicitta, the aspiration for enlightenment, for the welfare of others, then we need a method to actually strive for the goal of enlightenment. And here in the Lam Rim, the presentation, of course, was the 6 perfections: generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, wisdom. And even in those 6 perfections, we can see that we can condense these also into the same 3 core areas of practice: ethics, concentration, wisdom. So again, on an ethical basis, and here ethics is not simply avoiding harmful behavior, but it also includes the ethics of virtuous behavior and the ethics of benefiting others. Then we engage in the concentration practice, the shamatha practice, to develop a calm, clear and focused mind. And on that basis we enter into the wisdom practice, the vipassana practice. And here the wisdom we're talking about is this wisdom of emptiness, realizing nothing exists independently. Everything's empty of independent existence. And by having that motivation of bodhicitta and coming to realize emptiness, then we can find, or we can reach, the goal of enlightenment. And then the last thing in the Lam Rim, it briefly mentions that then if we've developed this renunciation, we've developed the bodhicitta, we have some experience of emptiness, then this is a good basis for going to the next level. That is to enter into Tantra or Vajrayana practice to accelerate the spiritual path to enlightenment. So this is the Lam Rim structure we looked at yesterday. And then yesterday evening we started to look at the shamatha practice, the concentration practice, in a little bit more detail. So there's a few more things I want to add now to the concentration practice. And then we'll look at the vipassana practice for the rest of this morning. So in that concentration practice, the shamatha practice, we can use this diagram here, this chart which we have. So we looked so far last night at the qualities we need to cultivate, the types of objects that we are to use in the practice. And again, the recommendation is to use the object that works best for you. And this morning we were practicing using the mind as the object and then resting in awareness, the shamatha without object. And one of the things that was recommended there is to have the eyes open, at least partially open. And there are a number of reasons why that is recommended in these two practices. The first is that by having the eyes at least partially open and we have some light coming in, this is very helpful for improving clarity. Because if we have our eyes closed, it's very easy to fall into dullness. Also, of course, with the eyes open, we're not really looking at anything, but the visual gaze is still a little bit engaged. And visual gaze only happens in the present moment. So it helps to lock us into the present moment. Whereas with the eyes closed, it's much more easy to drift into the past and the future. Also, of course, with the eyes open, we start to break down this false sense of duality. With the eyes closed, we really have a sense there's a me in here and a world out there. We really have a strong sense of subject-object duality. Whereas with the eyes open, that sense of duality is not as strong. It starts to break down. And we can really come to appreciate with the eyes open, actually there is no real subject-object duality. So that leads us into the Vipassana practice, because Vipassana practice is all about realizing emptiness. Nothing exists independently. There is no subject-object duality. So the eyes open in the shamatha practice can help lead us to that. Also, of course, with the eyes open in this practice, we are learning how to observe our mind with the eyes open already, which means it's much easier to transition into daily life. We can then more easily in daily life as well observe our mind with our eyes open, because generally in daily life we're walking around, our eyes are open. Whereas if we do this practice with the eyes closed and we develop the ability to observe the mind, we've only developed that with the eyes closed, which means in daily life with the eyes open, it's not as easy because we're not used to observing the mind with the eyes open. Whereas if we're already doing that in meditation, much easier to bring that into daily life as well. So for these reasons, it's very much recommended to have the eyes at least slightly open in this practice. Now, of course, here the conditions are not ideal with the eyes open, because maybe there's some people in front of you that are moving and so you get attracted for that. Of course, when you're doing this practice at home, we can avoid that. We can have a place where there's no movement to pull our attention, and then we can have some very blank wall in front of us so there's nothing to attract our attention. And we can also dim the light as well if we prefer. So these things we can adjust when we're at home. So I just wanted to add that to that practice. So there's a few more things I want to mention about the shamatha practice. So we'll use a diagram here for that purpose. Now, in terms of the shamatha practice, there are two main tools we use. The first and the main tool, of course, is mindfulness, a translation of the Sanskrit word smrti, the Pali word sati. Both of these words here literally mean to remember, to remember. So mindfulness is our ability to remember. So mindfulness is our faculty of being able to hold the object, to remember the object, without forgetting it, without becoming distracted. So in the diagram here, if we look right down the bottom, we see the meditator, and in their left hand is a rope. This rope is symbolizing mindfulness. And the symbolism is that we are to tie our mind with a rope of mindfulness to our object. Then in their right hand is a hook. This is symbolizing the other tool in this practice. Which is introspection. In Sanskrit, samprajana. Samprajana we can divide in two. Sampra is like a intensifier, and it means here well or good, well. And jhana means, janya means to know. So samprajana is well knowing, knowing well. So what is introspection, knowing well? Introspection is knowing well whether we're still holding the object or not. So introspection is quality control. It's monitoring the mindfulness. How is our mindfulness going? Are we still on the object, or are we starting to become dull or distracted? So that's what the hook is symbolizing, is that when we notice that we're becoming dull or distracted, we hook the mind back to the object. We reapply the mindfulness. So that's why the symbolism of the hook. So these are the two main tools we use in the shamatha practice. Any questions about that?
Is that the function given to the instructor? The introspection, when someone instructs the meditation, is that what he does when he asks if your mind drifted, then return?
Sorry, I'm not sure.
When we're in a guided meditation,
yeah,
then the instructor asks you, you ask us.
Yeah, if
your mind
yeah,
drifts.
so that's